Why would a jury be convinced that he's not lying under oath this time?
Yeah, so the defense has done an effective job of bringing out prior lies that Michael Cohen has told, including those under oath, and in suggesting to the jury that Michael Cohen lies whenever it's expedient for him to do so, when he thinks it's to his advantage to do so. Now, the prosecution will argue that most of those lies, including the ones under oath to Congress, were done at the behest and for the benefit of Donald Trump, and that they all predated when Michael Cohen broke with Trump. I think the biggest problem for the prosecution and Michael Cohen in that regard is that Michael Cohen has, even since he broke with Trump, said things that arguably are more lies under oath, including statements he made at his own guilty plea, admitting to crimes that he subsequently has said he didn't commit. So I think that's among the most problematic aspects of Michael Cohen's past and current testimony for the prosecution. And for that reason, among others, including his bias against Mr. Trump, which is evident, the prosecution needs to corroborate Michael Cohen's testimony as much as they can. And so I think what we're going to see from the prosecution arguing in their summation next week is that every aspect of Michael Cohen's testimony, with very small exceptions, is corroborated by the testimony of other witnesses who do not harbor the same kind of bias against Mr. Trump, and by documentary evidence in the case. And it's a very narrow category of the narrative that Michael Cohen provides the sole direct testimony about.
Well, Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's attorney, certainly was trying hard to land a glove today on Michael Cohen. To your point here, Jessica, he was also raising his voice. He started yelling questions and challenging Michael Cohen, which actually drew a bit of emotion out of the witness for the first time today that we've seen over the course of several days of testimony. Is that a win for the Trump legal team?
I think certainly there's been an effort to try to get under Michael Cohen's skin because he has come across mostly as pretty calm and measured. Certainly he did come across that way on his direct examination. And so I think that one of the tactics by the defense is to try to get him to sort of get out of this performative role into sort of the Michael Cohen who he was, at the time of some of the events in question, and who I think the defense would contend he still is, right, which is this person who's not so measured and trustworthy as he would like to come across as. So I think they're trying to get some emotion out of him, get him rattled also, so maybe he will admit some things and be less careful in his testimony. But of course, it could also be that part of that strategy is really just to satisfy the client, who is Donald Trump, and to show that Mr. Trump's lawyers are really sort of going back to bat for him to the full extent possible. It's not clear to me sort of how successful the efforts were to rattle Michael Cohen before the jury.
Well, on the subject of the jury, Jessica, if the timeline outlined by the judge today is to be believed, then we could get closing arguments early next week. How quickly do you expect a jury could turn around a verdict in this case?
Well, if the parties sum up early next week, which the judge indicated today could be as early as Tuesday, then it's possible that the jury will be starting its deliberations by Tuesday afternoon. I think the court's not going to be sitting on Wednesday, but then the jurors should have, I believe, Thursday and Friday to complete their deliberations. So it's really going to depend on how soon the jurors reach consensus, if they can, on the correct verdict in this case. Their verdict does have to be unanimous. Often jurors will sort of do essentially a poll preliminarily when they go in to start their deliberations. And if that suggests they're all on the same page, then their deliberations could be very quick. If there are those who are not in line with the others, or who simply want to review the evidence carefully before they indicate how they'd like to vote, then it could take longer. But I would imagine that the jurors would like to complete their work before the holiday weekend, if at all possible. But I imagine they'll be conscientious about it. There are 34 counts that they need to go through. And so, you never know exactly. But it doesn't strike me that this is a case in which necessarily the deliberations are going to go on at such length.
Is there a mechanism for jurors to police themselves or each other if during deliberations, in this case, a politically driven theme here, I don't know if I'm using the right words, but a political backdrop with a former president here in a campaign cycle. If fellow jurors think that there's a big MAGA supporter in the room or a diehard Joe Biden guy, is there something they do about that?
Well, the jurors can certainly bring it to the court's attention if a juror is not deliberating in good faith. They can write a note that'll be brought to the court's attention and the attention of the parties that they're having a problem in their deliberations, whatever it is the source of it, in which case the court could bring in the juror or jurors in question and remind them essentially of their oath, which is to apply the law as instructed by the court to the facts in the case. And so there is that mechanism, right, for bringing it to the court's attention that there is essentially a problem in the jury room without revealing to the court exactly what the nature of the problem is. There's also a charge that the judge can give to the jurors to continue working to the extent that they can to try to reach a unanimous decision in the event that it appears that they are deadlocked. But at some point, if it appears that they really cannot reach consensus, then a mistrial would be declared and the jurors would be discharged. And then that would be the time for a new trial to be ordered if, in fact, the jurors cannot reach a unanimous verdict.